9. And another cowardly trick. Marx was not in Cologne when the order of expulsion arrived. Although the circulation of the Neue Rheinische Zeitung was steadily increasing and it now had about 6,000 subscribers, its financial difficulties were by no means at an end. With the increasing sales, the immediate expenses also increased, whereas the revenue increased only later, so that Marx was in Hamm negotiating with Rempel, one of the two capitalists who had declared themselves prepared to put up the money for a communist publishing house in 1846. However, the generous fellow still kept his purse strings tightly drawn and referred Marx to an ex-lieutenant named Henze, who in fact did advance $300 for the paper, a loan for which Marx accepted personal responsibility. Although Henze was later exposed as an agent provocateur, at that time he was also being persecuted by the police, and he accompanied Marx back to Cologne, where the latter found the expulsion order awaiting him. This sealed the fate of the Neue Rheinische Zeitung. Several of the other editors were in the same position as Marx and could be expelled at any moment as foreigners, whilst the others were all being prosecuted. On the 19th of May the final red number appeared with the famous valediction of Freili Grott and a defiant farewell article by Marx in which the latter belaboured the government fiercely. Why bother with your foolish lies and your formal phrases? We are ruthless ourselves and we ask no consideration from you. When our turn arrives we shall make no apologies for our terrorism, but the royal terrorists, the terrorists by the grace of God and the right of law, are brutal, contemptible and vile in practice, secretive and double-faced in theory, and without honor in both theory and practice. The Neue Rheinische Zeitung warned the workers against any putsch, as the military situation rendered any such attempt hopeless, and the editors thanked their readers for their sympathy and support, declaring that their final word always and everywhere would be the emancipation of the working class. And at the same time Marx fulfilled the duties which devolved upon him as captain of the sinking ship. The $300 he had received from Henze, $1,500 paid in by subscribers, the presses, etc., which belonged to him. All resources in fact were used to meet the liabilities of the paper to its printers, its paper merchants, its clerks, its correspondents, its editorial staff, etc. Marx kept only the silver of his wife for himself and his family, and that had to pay a visit to the pawnbrokers in Frankfurt. The few hundred guilders which Marx obtained for this silver was all he and his family had to live on. From Frankfurt he went with Engels to the scene of the insurrection in Baden and the Palatinate, visiting first Karlsruhe and then Kaiserslautern, where they met Dester, who was the moving spirit in the provisional government. From Dester Marx received a mandate of the Democratic Central Committee to represent the German Revolutionary Party in Paris in the Montagne of the National Assembly, the social democracy of the day. A mixture of petty bourgeois and proletarian elements, which was preparing a great blow against the parties of law and order and their representative, the false Bonaparte. On their way back they were arrested by Hessian troops on suspicion of having taken part in the insurrection and taken to Darmstadt and from there to Frankfurt, where they were finally released. Marx then went to Paris, whilst Engels returned to Kaiserslautern to become the adjutant of a volunteer corps which had been raised by a former Prussian lieutenant named Willich. Writing from Paris on the 7th of June, Marx declared that a royalist reaction was in the saddle and that it was even worse than under Guizot, but that nevertheless a tremendous outbreak of the revolutionary volcano had never been nearer. However, his expectations were disappointed, for the blow which the Montagne was planning failed, and it failed in a not very edifying fashion. A month later the vengeance of the victors descended on Marx also. On the 19th of July the prefect of police conveyed an order of the Minister of the Interior to Marx that he should take up his domicile in the Département Morbihan. It was a cowardly blow, the infamy of infamies, as Freili Grott declared in a letter to Marx after receiving the news. Daniels declares Morbihan to be the most unhealthy district in France, marshy and fever-racked, the Pontine swamps of the Bretagne. Marx did not submit tamely to this cloaked attempt at murder, but succeeded in securing a stay of execution by an appeal to the Minister of the Interior. By this time Marx was in desperate financial straits and he appealed to Freili Grott and Lassalle for assistance. Both men did their best, but Freili Grott complained of Lassalle's indiscretion in collecting the necessary money, declaring that he had made the affair the talk of the taverns. Marx was greatly embarrassed at this, and in a reply on the 30th of July he declared, "The greatest financial difficulties are preferable to public begging, and I have written to him saying so. The business has annoyed me terribly." However, Lassalle succeeded in dissipating Marx's annoyance by a letter overflowing with goodwill. although his assurances that henceforth he would treat the matter with the greatest delicacy left room for doubt. On the 23rd of August Marx wrote to Engels telling him that he was leaving France. And on the 5th of September he wrote to Freiligrath that his wife would follow him on the 15th, though he still did not know where he was to find the money necessary for her journey and for her settling down when she arrived. Black Care accompanied him on his third exile, and it remained an all too steadfast companion.